On January 5th, 2016, there was a woman pushing a disheveled man around. You can see the man in the video looks very sickly and unwell. The woman proceeds to be more aggressive with him as he's resisting, but he eventually stops resisting and follows the woman. This is a disturbing video, but this is only the tip of the iceberg of something very much more disturbing. You see, the man in the video's name is James Prout. Unfortunately, James Prout found himself in a very sickening situation, which I'll unravel here in the video. Warning: the topics discussed in this video are very disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. James Prout was someone with learning disabilities, which unfortunately made him very vulnerable. At one point, James was in a relationship and had 2 kids and had a pretty stable life. But he started drinking and becoming an alcoholic. Eventually, his wife left him as he started to become more of an alcoholic, and he started to drink more and use more drugs. He ended up homeless, where he would engage in petty theft to stay afloat. He would also visit a soup kitchen in the area known as the People's Kitchen, where the underprivileged went to get a warm meal. One day, James met a man named Zahid Saman. He was physically disabled, which is why he went around in a wheelchair. However, he was known as a pillar to the community and a good friend to most. At one point, he found a dog in the area that belonged to a woman and brought it back to her. The woman offered him a reward, a cash reward, but he turned it down and said it was just the right thing to do. However, digging a little deeper into Zahid, he was a very twisted man that would prey on the vulnerable, and James was the perfect target. Zahid would also watch bestiality porn. Zahid volunteered at the People's Kitchen, mainly to find his victims. Zahid was described to his neighbors as a troublemaker. For starters, he planted video cameras outside his house and he would spy on his neighbors. He would watch him walk up and down the street. He would also call the police on his neighbors for any kind of noise complaint or minor disturbance. Sometimes he'd call the police for no reason at all and make up some kind of story. He would also go around and taunt people and record the interaction and say these people were harassing him. Even though he went around in a wheelchair, many people said they've seen him get up and walk perfectly fine. Many people speculated he only went around in a wheelchair to collect government assistance. He was indeed a very strange man. Strange man indeed. He lived with a woman named Kai Rayworth. Kai Rayworth was very involved in the community. She would visit the church and sing in the choir. She would also do a lot of volunteer work. After a bad breakup, Kay started to isolate herself and drink, which led her to go on online dating, where she met Zahid. Zahid was a bit younger than her, and she was thrilled to get attention from a younger man, even though he looked the way he looked. She offered that Zahid could move into her home and live with her. After Zahid moved in, Kay started taking on a lot of different personality changes. She started isolating herself from everybody, and her once happy-go-lucky personality started to fade. Zahid was taking control over her life. Zahid would tell her how to dress, what to eat. He would even go and tell her to get jobs, like part-time jobs, and bring him back the money so he could manage the money. He went as far as urinating in a jar and forcing Kay to drink it. Eventually, he got 2 dogs and forced Kay to have sex with the dog. If any of these commands were disobeyed, he would beat her. He was also very abusive towards Kay, oftentimes threatening to take her life with a hammer and he ended up putting cardboard boxes on the windows so no one could see inside. He would also chase her with a hammer, and he'd slam the hammer against the wall very loud. Eventually, he convinced Kay to get a rental property so they can make some money, but it wasn't about the money, no. He wanted to get a rental property so he could house more of his puppets, basically. This is when James comes into the story again. Zahid housed James and his girlfriend named Ann Colbert. Both James and Ann Colbert had some sort of disability, learning disabilities, and Zahid saw this as, an opportunity to control them. Eventually, Kay and Zahid's relationship started to fade away, even though they still lived together, and Zahid went back on Facebook and started hitting up the honeys, and he found a honey named Mira, and he moved Mira into the house with James and Ann Colbert. Zahid started controlling and isolating Mira just like he controlled everybody else, and Mira's family noticed that there's a change in her behavior. She started to withdraw from everybody and become quiet. He did similar acts to Mira as he did to Kay, like urinate in a jar, make her drink it, send the dogs after her, things of that nature. This is getting a bit confusing, so here's a map of the whole mess. So up here you can see that Zahid and his ex-girlfriend are living in the same house, and they're renting a house just down below here to James, Mira, and Ann. And at the time, James and Ann were dating. The five of them started some sort of cult with Zahid as the puppet master. The group didn't really have any purpose or mission, but they would just associate with each other. The group didn't have a hierarchy either, but James was always at the bottom somehow. He was basically the store runner. They made him do all the heavy lifting and run errands. James had no place to live at, so Zahid decided to bring him into the house and make him run errands. Considering Zahid was abusive towards everyone in the group, the woman would oftentimes blame James for the mishaps, and James would take the punishment. Even some of the women would start beating on James. Neighbors would see James staggering around the neighborhood moaning with bruises all over his face and teeth missing. The neighbors knew James had a drinking problem, so they just decided to leave him alone and not report this to the authorities. With all the abuse, James became very skinny and disheveled. Eventually, one of the brothers of the woman living at the house named Ann, who was James' girlfriend, moved into the house for a bit. Zahid accused him of stealing an iPad and some tools, which was probably not true. Ann's brother realized this guy was a kook and decided just to get out of the house as soon as possible. Zahid kind of took this frustration out on James, saying that James should have protected the house better, and started beating him up ferociously. Even though James had nothing to do with it, they took their anger out on him and told him he should have watched over the brother better. The gang even went as far as stabbing him in the private area. Eventually, James posted a bunch of pictures on Facebook with the captions, "My mouth hurts, my body hurts, my shoulder hurts." This was obviously a cry for help, but no one stepped in. In the pictures, you can see James beaten up, bruised from all the abuse he was receiving from everybody. His ex-girlfriend Ann Colbert even liked some of the photos. Over the following months, the beatings just got worse and worse. He had several bottles smashed over his head. Eventually, someone took a hammer and a sizzle and started hitting his teeth, knocking out a lot of them. Zahid had a thing for bestiality, so at one point he made his dog sexually assault James while the group watched and laughed. The worst thing they did was hold him down and cut his scrotum open, removing one of his testicles. They boiled the testicle in hot water and made James eat it. Eventually, the dynamic was basically James, Ann, and Mira living in the house, and they would walk James down the street down to his torture chamber, which was Kay's house with Zahid in it. One night after leaving Zahid's house after a beating, you can see Kay scold James over something, then continue to walk down the street. James looks so weak and eventually collapses on the ground, and the two women drag him. Just 3 days later, James unfortunately passed. The night James passed, he was at Zahid's house, and they took James down back to his house. Mira sent a text that night at 2 a.m. complaining that James won't stop making noise from all the beating he took, so they took a pair of pants and wrapped it around James's head. They took off the pair of pants and he was dead. He suffocated from the pants. Half an hour later, they went back to Zahid's house and took an empty wheelchair and headed back to the house James was at. They wrapped James's deceased body in sleeping bags and put him in the wheelchair and dumped him in a nearby waste pit. Where they lived, there's a lot of no man's land on the outskirts, so they dropped him off in one of those areas. They went back to the house and had a bonfire, probably to burn the evidence. In the following days, the group went around asking anyone if they seen James, in an intent to offload the blame. No one in the community bought this because no one from the gang officially filed a report of a missing person for James. The gang went back to James's body to steal his bank card and took money out of his account. The guilt finally caught up to one of them. This was Ann, James's ex-girlfriend. She threatened to call the police about what happened to him. However, Zahid was one step ahead. He took a piece of paper and wrote down that Ann was the one that murdered James, and he wrote the note as it was Ann, so he forged a letter about this. He then called the police and said that Ann was beating him with a hammer, and the police came immediately. When the police showed up, he dropped the letter. The police knew Zahid was a loony at this point, and they didn't believe anything he said. They didn't believe the letter either. A few days later, the whole gang was arrested. All four of them blamed each other and kept changing their stories, but the police weren't buying this BS. Out of all the information the police gathered, they concluded Zahid and Ann were definitely present at the death of James and gave them both life in prison. They couldn't get Kai and Mira into it for some reason, but it was obviously they were involved in it. So they gave Kai 12 years and Mira was given 9 years. For some reason, after 5 years, Mira and Kay were released. Thanks for watching.